Okay, cool. Right. So, if I suppose today if I was going to talk about my my story, my story to discovering well-being, discovering a spirituality that sustains me, then I have to go back to my drinking, which was in my, well, it started when I was 13, but it really hit a peak. There was a really dark period in my 20s where I was just out of control with drink, and and I think out of control for me is the marker of addiction. You know, it's not just a matter of how much you drink, but it's that can't follow through on promises, waking up saying today I'm not going to drink and finding myself in the pub at lunchtime. Anyway, without going into the whole detail of that, unless you want me to, I reached a point um, where um, I encountered Alcoholics Anonymous, and just by chance, I wasn't going there. I was going there as a visitor, who didn't have the problem, and I came across their literature, and I got the fright of my life, because when I looked at the questions, most of them applied to me, and it's astonishing what denial will do, because instantly I went to, they've lowered the bar. Everybody qualifies for this, and over the next few months, I tried everything I could to prove to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic, and everything I tried was a failure. And I reached a point a week before Christmas, where I was out for lunch, supposed to be a civilized lunch, and I just couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop drinking until late at night, and I was in a terrible state. I saw myself in a shop window in a reflection and hated what I'd become, and there was just a moment of surrender, or today I would call it a moment of insight. I think I can't do this anymore. I can't continue. I didn't necessarily have these words to it, but something changed in that moment, and I thought, I'm going back to that Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm willing. I'm willing to stop drinking. I'm willing to do whatever it takes for my life to get better. And it's only with hindsight that I see the power of that insight, because it could have been like those other promises I made, waking up in the morning saying I won't drink today. I mean, at the time, I knew that I was it was coming from a very different place, but the proof was in the proof of the pudding was that didn't come along until much later. And in that moment, I stopped drinking, and I've never had a drink since, in almost 30 years. And strangely, the further I get away from it, the more grateful I feel, for what seems like a moment of grace, that moment of insight, and it really was life changing for me. So I went to AA, and I did the AA thing, and my life did get very much better. There's no doubt about that. And aspects of my life opened up. I'd been a very intolerant atheist until shortly before this period, and I had to open to finding a spirituality. That seemed, I could see that was central to the program, and I worked very hard at that. But if I'm honest, there was a lot of faking it to make it. There was I didn't really have a sense of the spiritual that I could trust. I was willing to do anything, but because at that time I did not understand one of the things that I later got from the three principles about how thought is the creator of my experience. My belief was that if God was acting in my life, then God should straighten out all the difficulties, and that didn't seem to be happening. That I seemed to have a lot of struggle in my life, a lot of problems, and I still had really emotional ups and downs, which again I didn't understand as just being normal. So I spent about 20 years in A, and I was beginning to. There were things I was beginning to become skeptical of. I was beginning to doubt the whole disease concept of addiction. I'm not denying that addiction exists as a phenomenon, but the idea that it was something that once I was sober, I still had a disease, I'd never really bought into that. And I began to really, really question it. And I also began to see that the more I saw myself as diseased or broken, then that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I saw that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, not just for me, but for many of my friends who I'd got to know over many years and, had also been sober for a long time. And I began to have more insights, again, before I encountered the principles. But for example, I had the insight one day that if I'm going to have any quality of life, I've really got to start trusting myself rather than running everything through what's the right thing to do, what's the sober thing to do, what would AA say. I've really got to listen within. And I didn't even know exactly what that meant, but I knew there was truth in it, and I knew that I was willing to sort of open in that direction. And as I say, the whole idea of being broken began to just dissolve for me. I really began to question it. And shortly after that, really by chance, I went to a training in London, which I thought was going to be about something completely different. And I encountered this thing that we're calling the three principles, the work of Sid Banks and other teachers such as yourself. And it was a weekend workshop, and it absolutely hit me like a train. I don't know whether someone used this phrase, but I heard very powerfully, at least from within, that confirmation of this idea that I wasn't broken, nobody's broken. It's not a denial of things happening in life, and sometimes terrible things happening in life, or addiction being a real issue, but there is an essence. I got that there's an essence that's unbroken and unbreakable. And that was incredibly helpful to me. There were other things in that first weekend that I heard so this idea that the experience of life that I was having wasn't coming from the circumstance around me, but was coming from how thought, this stream of thought that runs through each of us, was treating those circumstances, how I was thinking about those circumstances, even although much of that thinking was invisible. And that was a real game changer as well. That I began to see that the circumstances were less important than the inside job of what was being created and by me, and more importantly, even the capacity to create, that this was an ongoing thing, and that I wasn't stuck with a particular viewpoint or opinion or emotion in response to anything. There was a lot more freedom and spaciousness. And there was a very peculiar thing that happened that weekend that I still can't, I still don't fully understand. But Jamie Smart was one of the people taking it. Aaron Turner was the other, and he was using the expression, which I don't really use now, but he was talking about a higher quality of mind, that if you are touched by these principles, it can have the effect of elevating you to a higher quality of mind. And I have heard other people talk about a higher level of consciousness, and he talked about, he had recently gone through the loss of his father, but that although it had been a sad affair, the whole bereavement had occurred at a higher quality of mind. And I don't know why it stuck with me, but then when I came home to Scotland from that conference, I discovered that my own dad was terminally ill. And without any effort or positive thinking or anything else, I discovered that I was going through this experience with him for want of a better expression, this higher quality of mind. And I mean, I can't know what it would have been had I not just encountered the principles, but I knew that I could see that there was something very different happening for me than was happening for my siblings. And it was a really important sort of connecting and spiritual experience, that whole thing. And that there was sadness, and if I talk about it much more, I'll probably start crying. Now it wasn't that it was nothing. It wasn't that there was no loss, and but it was as though the love was to the fore. The love and the connection were to the fore, and and that has never left me, that sense of the love and connection to the fore. He died a few weeks after this event in London. But there was also something about, not just about what I'd experienced, but the fact that something in me had changed, that was not down to my ego or what I thought, who I think I am or what I thought I knew, that something was occurring in me, that it was another gift, another moment of grace or time of grace. And it was almost 8 years since I was on that first weekend. And another thing that struck me then was, this is what I've been looking for. I don't even know how I knew it so forcefully, but I really did. And I kind of knew that the search was over, and yet I would be learning more for the rest of my life. And that has been the case. I couldn't have imagined how deep the new learning would go, or how, and how profound fresh insights and so on would go. But in the last 8 years, it's just been an extraordinary roller coaster of outside events. It's been far from a quiet time, if you like. Everything's changed, but my quality of life has been quite extraordinary. There's a sort of base level of serenity, really. I mean, that for the first time, Alcoholics Anonymous is all about serenity, but I feel I can hand and heart say that I know what serenity is now. And it goes, it's up and down. I'm completely human. Earlier on tonight, I've had a series of calls. My daughter, who was supposed to be coming to collect the cat, started sending me these angry texts. I could have gone through her because I'm in the middle of hosting calls and things. But there's something about, again, on that first weekend, we spoke about our default position being this high quality of mind. I don't quite see it like that. I think our default position is connection or serenity or peace. And what I do know, I certainly don't exhibit that in any moment, but what I know for sure is that the potential is there in every moment, and it's my humanness, which is fine. That's fine. That takes me away from that, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. I'm not trying to be better anymore. I'm not on a course of self-improvement. I'm just, I'm loving life. Frequently, there's a lot of emphasis in recovery, as you know, on gratitude, but and gratitude lists never really did much for me. But what I find now is that I would say on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day, I'm just seized with, God, I love my life. I remember doing something like going to catch a bus, or really nothing special, or I'm watching something on Netflix and I think, man, this is the ultimate creative expression. This mini, what people can do, the writing, the acting, the photography, the cinematography, all of it. So gratitude has become something very different. It's just a spontaneous bubbling up that happens. And I could go on and on and on about other things that have happened, but the bottom line is that understanding, to the extent that I do, which I'm sure is minimal, even on my own experience of how it's changed, but right from the beginning, with just this, I suppose the most basic understanding that these three principles have changed my life, knowing that how we operate, having a sense that of who I who I am at essence is this part of the whole, and this unbreakable part of the whole, without any denial of all the drama that I was participated in over the years, but and that the experience and the circumstances of my life are not the things that create who I am or how I have to feel. That yeah. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it there if that's okay.
That's perfect. I'm gonna stop